Hello, rulers. Welcome to episode 2 of Live by the Rule or Living by the. See, I messed that up already. I'm going to stop that and I'm going to Living by the Rule. Living by the Rule. Okay, I'll edit that out. So, anyways, I won't stop.
Okay.
But anyways, all right. Hello, rulers, and welcome to episode 2 of the Living by the Rule podcast. I am Nikki Mack, and I am joined again by my friend and person who puts guardrails on what I do and say a little bit so that I don't go veering off the deep end. My human guardrails, Athea Long. Who is here to talk tonight. We are going to be talking today about mastering our mindset and how we can, I'm just messing this up because I just lost where I had it somewhere. Where did it go? I'm going to have to start this over.
How we can rewire ourselves.
Yes, I won't start over. I'm just going to, because I found it. So I'm going to just start the intro over and I'll edit that out. All right. So hello, rulers, and welcome to episode 2 of the Living by the Rule podcast. I am Nikki Mack, and I am joined by my friend and human guardrail person that helps to keep me on track, Athea Long. And today we are going to be talking about mindset mastery and how you can become the ruler of your life. So we're going to talk a little bit about how it is that we come to form our mindset. Like what are the things that go into developing us as people and how we think and process the stuff that happens in our world. And then what can we do in order to kind of take control of that? So Athea, welcome.
Hi.
Hello. So why don't we start out a little bit about, let's take it back to the beginning.
Okay, like the beginning of time or like?
I'll say beginning of human life. Not time. Like let's think of the beginning of Nicole. So when you have a baby, babies come into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh, new, doing their thing. And I'm assuming that as a mom, that they are kind of absorbing everything that's going on around them. And their little baby brains aren't really able to process a whole lot. And I know that, we can fast forward, we'll say, up until, like, I don't know, at what point does it all start to like sink in a little bit? Let's think about it that way.
I mean, honestly, from the time that you're born. Because your brain is functioning, right? And so think about a newborn, right? It doesn't know how to talk, but it can definitely tell you that he or she is hungry by crying.
It's true.
Right? So hunger is an emotion, and the need is to be fed, and the newborn cannot do that for themselves. So they use what they can to ensure that they get fed, right? So that is crying. And there are cues, babies have cues, right? For when they're sleepy, they will rub their eyes, they yawn, right? It's an indication that they are now tired, which is, again, another feeling. And then as the parent, your job is to be able to recognize that and put them down for a nap. So honestly, this stuff really starts from birth. But I think what you're more speaking of, in sort of like your mind, mastering your mind set, right? So I think what you're really talking about are core beliefs. Yes. Because it is our core beliefs, right, that really sort of kind of dictate and support kind of our thought process.
Right.
And so when we're talking about a core belief, right, this is a person's most central idea or ideas about themselves, others, and the world. So these beliefs, they are actually a lens through which every situation and life experience is seen. So if you think about that, right, that's basically perception, sort of how you understand something. And so you and I could be having the same, be in the same experience, sort of like experiencing the same thing or the same situation. But because we have different core beliefs, we might think, feel, and behave very different in that same situation, right? And so we talk a lot just about the idea of like shifting that, but I don't think we really talk enough about sort of what's underneath that, that is the need to shift the thought, right? So we have something like 60,000 thoughts a day, and all of those thoughts derive from our core beliefs.
Wow. So at what age do you, generally speaking, are your core beliefs kind of starting to set or starting to get kind of settled in? Like we talked about, you're a baby, you have needs, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, is it like 2-year-olds? Because like 2-year-olds get to be.
I mean, so probably sort of when you start to be able to like have memory recall, right? So think about like maybe 5 years old, when you think back to like your earliest memory, because it's the things that you experience that help to shape and kind of define what those core beliefs are. So, it's much easier. I can give an example on both sides, but if you're a child and let's say you have a parent that at the age of 5 or 6 walks out on your family, right? And there is sort of no explanation, no understanding for that. And that parent just like never comes back. If that situation sort of isn't navigated in a healthy way, what ultimately can happen is that child can develop a core belief about that situation and that experience, right? One could be, oh, I'm not lovable. My parent didn't love me enough to stick around. One could be, there's something wrong with me, that they couldn't love me or didn't want to love me, right? And because at that age, unless you're really proactive as a parent about sort of talking to your kids and talking about the thoughts and helping them navigate situations that are really, frankly, emotional, like very emotionally charged, something like that can sort of become a core belief. And then when you think about that, right, if that is the core belief and then you travel through life, what kind of relationships do you think you're going to have? Or how do you think that you're going to think about and perceive and understand relationships that come into your life or people that come into your life? You're probably going to have trust issues. It's probably going to be really hard for you to believe that someone cares about you just for you, or that you're even worthy of that kind of love, right? And unless you're willing to sort of take that dive or sort of, and then this is where I would say like, hey, this is where that would be something to explore in therapy, right? But you don't have to explore that in therapy. You should, and we encourage you to, but just even the idea of taking the step back of like, whoa, that had a significant impact on my life. And because that had such a significant impact on your life as a child, it's probably showing up in similar ways as an adult. And it's just a question of whether or not you're paying attention to that.
Yeah, I think that was so I have been in therapy, or let me say, I have been taking advantage of the benefit that my company provides me because I feel extremely fortunate and grateful that they did. That the company that I have worked for the past 20 some odd years offered this, employee assistance benefit. And so after I started therapy, which I initially started therapy because there was someone at my office that was kind of bullying me and I had to figure out how to kind of deal with that. But once I got past that and came up with some ways to deal with that situation, the next thing that my therapist told me, as I started to dive into things that were happening with my relationships, my therapist at the time told me, he was like, so Nikki, I just want you to know that you are a textbook example of a woman who was raised without a father in her household. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah. He said, women who don't have a stable father figure in their household tend to be attracted to men who are not available. And that was like the most mind-blowing thing that I ever heard. And it was, it was 20 some odd years ago when he told me that. And then I started to think about some of the relationships that I had. And even like when I became determined that I wasn't going to let that, direct the way that I selected, people that I got involved with, like somehow it still managed to come up over and over and over again in different ways. And
so right there, that dynamic, right? One would identify potentially the core belief as being, I am unlovable, or I am not deserving of love. In case in point, you being a woman, not having a male role model in your life to show you sort of like how you deserve to be treated and loved. And because there is an absence there, you have no role model or sort of guidance on what that should look like. At the same time, there's just also the absence of this person who was supposed to be present. Now, unless that person is, your father was dead, right? Like can't be there. But like if they're just making the choice to not be there, it often then creates this space for you as the individual, and being as young as you were, to sort of start thinking, right? As I said, something like 60,000 thoughts. So some of those thoughts then start to form the core belief. And that becomes the thing that sort of is your compass for how you understand and perceive the world, right? And then what lies on top of that core belief is like surface level beliefs. So then take this situation you're talking about in the relationship, it's sort of like, oh, but but they show up for me sometimes, or, I have to kind of be okay with this, or something like, I am unlovable, right? But the response is maybe the surface level belief is more like, well, he's loving me the best that he can, and I should accept that, right? Versus that, oh no, I deserve all the love and I should be treated the way that I want, right? But because the core belief is that you are unlovable, how do you think everything else plays out and sort of your thought pattern, and then feeds right into the choices that you make?
Yeah. Yes, that one plagued me for a really long time.
Yeah. I mean, it plagues a lot of people.
It translated in different ways in many different relationships, and I am. I guess I'm happy to say that it's amazing how just becoming aware of that, like when, because we all like to think that we are always in control. Like I when I was in my 20s, it's like, yeah, I thought that I got it all, I got it together. And to have someone to tell me like, yeah, you think that you're running, what you're doing, but you really are not. It's like you have this thing that you don't even realize is there, that's driving your behavior. And it ended up becoming one of the greater challenges of my life, to really kind of accept the fact that I was, that this was something that was there, that I was going to have to figure out how to navigate. I think the other part that I often think about is, and a lot of times people, again, don't think about it, is our like hormones, right? Like human behavior is driven a lot by things that we can't see, our hormones and things like that. And I know, especially when you hit like 12, and 13, puberty kicks in. Like, how does that happen? Like the scientific part, we don't have to get deep off into the, biology, but like how much of our behavior is actually being driven by those hormonal things that we can't see?
Well, it's not just so much the hormonal, like the elevation or fluctuation, we'll say, of one's hormones. It's actually how the fluctuation of those hormones can impact the intensity of your emotional plane, right? So we are born with an internal compass. That's our emotions. Like we're hardwired to survive. And I talk about this a lot. So in the space of when we are born, we are hardwired to survive for the sake of, right? So if we talk about evolution and sort of the need to survive, the need to procreate. So case in point, as a woman, you have a monthly cycle, a monthly menstrual cycle. And at a certain time of the month, your hormone levels actually start to change. I was actually talking about this today with someone, that your hormone levels start to change, and there is an increase in your almost motivation and desire to have sex, to want to be intimate. Now, this might not be the case for all women, but sort of by design, because we're built and created to procreate, something needs to happen in order to trigger that. Right? For us to be a willing participant, to, want to actually receive this, right? So it becomes a need. There's a need to be sexually satisfied that can be very much driven by our hormones, right? Based on the time of month, but it could also be driven by just the want to be sexual, right? So the need and the want, and both of those are emotionally based, right? It comes down to that sort of like ebb and flow of where are you emotionally, and then the thing that then gets introduced there that can also impact sort of the intensity and the flow and the ebb of these emotions is your thinking, right? Because depending on what those core beliefs are that are going to drive those thoughts are then going to impact the intensity of whatever you're feeling. And it could be, positive impact, or it could be negative impact. And so it's not, and I think that is the crux of sort of what makes a human being so complicated, right? Because it's not just this or this or this, but it's all of this, that when we start to feel the emotions of whatever we are feeling, so whatever those emotions are, if we don't understand them and we don't know how to identify them, and we can't label them, what happens is we become overwhelmed, right? And when we become overwhelmed, we tend to either shut down, fight, flee, right? So a message gets sent to our brain, right? This triggers our automatic nervous system to prepare us to fight or flee. Again, remember how we're hardwired. We have an internal automatic system that our brain sends a signal that says, oh, threat, danger, right? And so because our brain doesn't actually understand and doesn't know how to define complex emotions, the brain perceives all of that as threatening. And so then you start having adrenaline and cortisol pumping through your body, preparing you to fight or flee. But if you take a second and realize, like, but what are you fighting and what are you fleeing? You're actually trying to fight and flee something that is natural, that lives inside of you, which is the complexity of emotions, because it's not just feeling one thing. We feel many things, many feelings all at the same time. So case in point, like the idea we're talking about, like hormones, right? Like why you could be happy and crying at the same time, right?
They're done that.
Or like in the same space, you're angry and happy and confused and embarrassed all at the same time, right? And it has partially to do with maybe where your hormone levels are. It also has partially to do with where your thinking is. So those core beliefs that are driving those thoughts. And then it just has to do with where your natural emotional state is.
Yeah.
And so all of that is happening. I mean, I think the hormone piece, that comes at an age of puberty, sort of when you go through that. But like the emotional component and the thinking, that's there from the time that you're born.
Wow. So how much, like, I like to think of parenting, right? In a lot of ways is like programming.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Sure. Yeah.
And all of this. I mean, it's all, like, as you said, we're all very complicated and little, just little balls of, you got the hormones, you got your programming, you got your emotions, you got all this stuff that's happening outside of you, like all of these inputs that are going into the development of you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how did we survive? How have we gotten to this point?
Because we are surviving.
Right.
We're not living. The question is, how do we live? Because we are hardwired to survive. So it's not actually a question of how we survive. It's a question of how do we move from surviving to living?
Yeah.
That's the question, right? Because inherently we know how to survive because we instantaneously react and have an impulse, and we react and respond to whatever we're feeling or whatever we're experiencing for the purpose of protecting ourselves, defending ourselves, even if it's not a healthy decision or if it even makes sense, right? Like think about when you get into an argument with someone says something, let's say they are criticizing, they're using criticizing language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like something like, you left me on the corner, right? Like that might have been exactly what happened, but it's very critical because you're focusing on someone's behavior. Instantaneously, you as the person receiving that message is going to feel this need to defend and protect. Like, but I didn't mean to leave you on the corner, and I don't understand. Like, I tried to get right. We immediately need to defend and protect because someone is attacking us, right? Wow. Versus, because there's an emotional response, right? Versus that same person saying, I'm really disappointed, or my feelings are hurt. And then the conversation is, oh, why are your feelings hurt? I missed you today. I couldn't find you. And then the conversation, like, then I'm not feeling so attacked. So then I can say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to not show up or leave you on the corner. I'm so sorry. So then I'm not necessarily needing to defend my behavior, but now I'm practicing and showing empathy for the fact that I hurt you.
That sounds like such a far leap for people.
It is a far leap because no one taught us this, right? So all these things that we're talking about, right? We're talking about like emotional awareness. We're talking about self-regulation, empathy, social skills. That's emotional intelligence. Those are basically the elements, I refer to them as muscles, of emotional intelligence that up until just recently, probably within the last like 10 to 15 years, really, has that become a thing, right? Like growing up in my household, like amazing just by happenstance. I grew up in a household where, it was like, express yourself, say whatever you want, like you're allowed to have an opinion, like speak your mind, and it's good, right? Like, but that's not most houses. Most people grew up, and many people still grow up,
right,
or come from an environment where like, oh, you don't talk about your emotions. It's not okay to talk about your emotions. Don't share that, right? Suck it up, hide it, cry in the closet. Like, I need to be strong, I need to be brave, I can't let people see me cry, or I can't say that I'm hurting because now I'm weak, right? Those are misconceptions. Those are stereotypes and false nomers. Like, that's not true. That's just what people thought. So this is how people function. I mean, and then if you break that down culturally or racially, right, by, group, it's also sort of like very much frowned upon,
Right.
culturally speaking. And so where would we have learned that?
Yeah, I always say every time I watch like any Netflix period piece, you just realize how far we've come as a species. Because
Yeah.
if you go back to like medieval time or even before that, like really, like you said, like 15, 20 years ago, like nobody was talking about their emotions really, and how they were feeling, and how the process of processing those emotions was impacting the way that the way that they were navigating their lives. Like, yeah, we weren't talking about that. It was
no. And so think about this. If we are hardwired to survive, and we survive based on our internal compass, which is our emotional reader, right? Basically implying that, like, instinctually and impulsively, based on how we feel, we're going to react to defend and protect ourselves. So the reaction is the behavior, the emotion is the trigger. So we tend to all just react. We don't ever really take time to pause and say, oh my gosh, how am I feeling? I'm feeling lots of things. Let me take a second here. Let me step back. Because we're not hardwired that way. And so, but that's something that you can teach yourself. You can change that, right? Like you can change and upgrade your software, right? So just because you're hardwired that way doesn't mean that's the way you have to be.
Yeah.
Because you can control what you think, right? So case in point, you can shift your core beliefs, but that means you have to take time to actually know what your core beliefs are. So there goes a deep dive into you, right? There goes the processing. There goes the time to sort of look at, explore, really try to understand, like, what are my core beliefs? What's impacting and taking, my attention, or shifting my perspective, right? What do I want it to be?
Right.
Right. So that takes time, right? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't like hey, go work on this for 2 months and then you'll be good.
No, I saw that meme online on Instagram that said that all I needed to do was to and so it's supposed to just happen right away, right? Like, isn't that how it's supposed to?
It's not the same thing. Like, practice gratitudes for 21 days and then you'll be happier.
Right.
Kind of, you're literally talking about kind of rewiring yourself and really upgrading your hardware.
Right.
And that really is like a lifelong thing, because we are creatures of habit. Behaviors are hard to change. Thoughts are hard to change. And so you have to constantly be very intentional, strategic, and conscious about how you do that. And it also depends on how old you are, right? Like, I don't want to say that, like, oh, well, if you're, in your 60s, there's probably no chance of that, right? That's not true.
I'm not in my 60s, but I'm just.
No, but it's not true, because you can make small changes, right? But the idea is that it's not like try this for 6 months. It's like, hey, I really want to devote time and energy into really understanding me to become a healthier person, so that I have more control over how I navigate my life.
Yeah. No, my thing is, and I believe that everybody has the capacity to do this if they're willing. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, you really have to, first off, you have to realize that there's something that needs to be changed. Right. And then you have to be willing to go through the process in order to make the change. And I think a lot of people, we see the stuff, you see the stuff on social media that tells you you should be doing this. But
Right,
then
but
when it actually becomes time to get it done, it's like,
it's
oh,
much
this is
easier
hard.
said than done. It's much easier said than done because frankly, it's a journey of self-discovery, and
Right.
discovering things about yourself is very scary, right? Because again, those are those emotions. So you're going to feel shame and guilt and probably embarrassment and confusion and sadness, right? Again, they're emotions and we are terrified of them. Terrified. Um, it's, we act and we react and we respond based on fear, right? So nothing even bad has to happen. Just thinking about something bad happening and the person is reacting to the what if of that. Like,
Yes.
because now, what if something bad happens, right? Okay, now I need to prepare for something bad to happen. And I'm running around doing all of these things, spending all my time, wasting all this energy, putting something in place for when something bad happens. We all know at the end of the day, something bad is going to happen eventually because just bad stuff happens. And so
Yeah.
it's sort of like you have to decide how you want to spend your time. You have to decide how you want to, what kind of energy do you want to harness for yourself, right? We always talk about the like controlling your emotions. It's not so much about controlling your emotions. It's really about controlling your thoughts, adjusting
Mm,
those core beliefs, shifting that perspective so you can adjust how you feel about it.
right. Yeah, and that's where I mean, I know you touched on a little bit about the whole gratitude piece. Like that's a
Yeah,
really big thing for
it is.
really learning to kind of shift how you think about challenging situations. And
Correct.
um, I follow a practice that talks about learning to see your challenges as actual gifts. And so when you see them as gifts, then it's something that you can then be thankful for. And so, and you're psyching yourself up, right? And it's not to say that the terrible things that are happening to you aren't bad, but
Well,
instead of letting the the fear, the stuff that may be outside of your control kind of flood your brain with all of these thoughts and take you down negative paths. And I liken it to my little negative internal talk track, like feeding that. Um, by actually saying, you know what, I see this is an opportunity for me. This is a chance for me to somehow grow, transform. This is a part of my hero story, like my survivor story. So in that regard,
right.
I'm thankful for this, and use that as motivation to kind of move, to keep moving and not let yourself get stuck. I found that to be extremely helpful. Now, I will grant you, it takes a lot of practice, people.
Right. And
Yeah.
to literally call out and name the practice, it's called cognitive flexibility, right?
Mm,
And so your ability to shift your perspective, adjust, adapt as things arise. And so the ability to shift that, right? That muscle is where resilience is built.
right.
So in order to navigate difficult, stressful situations, right? Or something like change, which is inevitable, most often change is not something that you're choosing to do. It's often something that is put upon you or it happens
For
just
you. Happens for you. You
to
have
for you, right? For you. Most people would say to you,
to
right?
you,
So
for
it
you.
happens to you, but if you have that power and you're sort of flexing that muscle, the cognitive flexibility muscle, then you can shift the perspective from, oh, this is happening to me to, oh, wow, this happened for me,
Right.
right? And, but that takes time. That's a muscle that you have to actively flex. And if you're not flexing it in the downtime, then it's never ever going to be available to you when you actually need it. So the
Right.
idea of things like practicing daily gratitudes, positive affirmations, things like writing down your daily successes. Those are all in the vein of positive thinking, right? So we talk about the power of positive thinking. And in that vein, right, if your core beliefs, or we'll call them like harmful, and we'll call these harmful beliefs, right? But in the vein of like our more negative, so things like if your core beliefs are things like I am weak, I'm a loser, I am trapped, I'm unlovable, I will end up alone, no one likes me, I'm bad, I'm worthless. People, or like externally, people can't be trusted. The world is dangerous. Nothing ever goes right, right? So if those are your core beliefs, where do you think your thoughts are? Right? Like your thoughts are naturally going to go to the negative. So I keep saying a lot about like, oh, well, some people, people are either positive, you either have positive thoughts or negative thoughts. Like you tend to lean one towards the other. If you tend to lean to the negative thoughts, there's a really good chance that you have some really harmful core beliefs, because it's those harmful core beliefs that are influencing your surface beliefs and those thoughts, right? If you tend to go more towards the positive, that would imply that your core beliefs are probably more positive in nature and probably more healthy. And so that's just something that you can actually examine and take the time to like really think about like, what are my core beliefs? And then when you start looking at those things, you can sort of say, oh, wow.
It's funny because even like talking about the situation with my dad and not having my father around. The one thing that my mom always told me was that she got the prize, right? So it was like it was like, he's not here, that's okay. I got the prize. I was, and so I always kind of had that became my core belief. Like I was never that I was like, oh, I'm not worthy of love or anything like that. But it was just, it's not that big of a deal if this person's not here. Like they just tended to not be available. And it's funny because my mom married my stepdad when I was like 12, right? Which is another big time. And my stepdad became very influential in my life and kind of helped to shape what I envision as being, actually, it's funny, when my mom met my now husband, she was like, oh my God, you found your stepdad. So my husband was in my office one day and he was like, that picture of your stepdad? I was like, yeah. He was like, wow, that's weird.
Well, they say we tend to marry our parents.
And so, so I found my stepdad. But what ended up happening was my stepdad was someone who was, he was a very good man. And so he loved to like take care of my mom, and he was there, for her and there for me and all these things. And so it ended up causing problems for me in my adult life, in that I was attracted somehow to men who were unavailable, but then my expectation of them was that you were going to treat me like my stepdad. And so it was like, I was always like, okay, this is not working. You're not doing what, you're not meeting my expectations or behaving in the way that I feel that I deserve. And so, that would cause friction in my relationships. And so, I finally got to a point where I was just like, forget it. I'll just be by myself. Like, I had my daughters and, again, still same thing. It's like, I don't really need the guy. I got my daughters, I got the prize, so I'm good. And I know, I'm sure that thought process for me probably programmed them with some things that, they'll have to kind of work through as in their own adult lives. But, it's funny. It's just how all these things just kind of converge to shape you into the person that you are. And then I always tell people it's always about choices, right? So knowing that, I have this tendency to be attracted to people who are unavailable. When I met my now husband and was dating someone else who kind of fell into that unavailable category, and I had the choice between going with that guy, the things that had caused me hurt and pain and trauma through all of my life, or picking the unconventional choice, the person who was available, who was, honest in telling me what they were expecting from a relationship. And I made the choice, like it was a conscious choice to pick the available person. And when I made that choice, like from that point going on, going forward, it's like my love, my life has been completely transformed. So can you talk just a little bit about, what can people, like you said that this is a muscle that people have to really kind of exercise over time, but like, how do you get the strength or the mental fortitude, or what is it that you need to do to build up to really become a ruler of your life and make a different choice? Because I think that that's really what it's all about.
So before I answer that question, I'm going to comment on what you said really quickly. So you made this choice to choose the person that was open and compassionate and respectful and loving, right? So ultimately what you did is you changed your core belief to that you deserve that kind of love, right? Because so like you having an absent father, it definitely led and created a core belief for you. Maybe not that you don't deserve love, maybe that's not it, but maybe, something on the scale of that, like, you're not good enough to have that kind of love.
Right.
Right. And so in that process and all this work that you've done, you making the choice to choose the ultimate love, the self-deserving kind of respectable, all-encompassing, embracing kind of love, right? Was not just like a choice, but like a shift in, yes, how you saw yourself. So that does tie right into the core belief. You might not know exactly what that core belief was if that's not something that you fully like dove into, but there is a shift. And from that moment on and making that decision, it allowed you to see yourself and accept yourself and love yourself differently than you were loving yourself before.
So I have a pillow on my bed. I get teased about my pillowscape because I have like 10 pillows on my bed. My husband hates it. I have like 10 pillows on my bed, but I have one pillow on my bed that says love you more. And so a lot of times when, I tell my husband, oh, I love you. And he says, oh, I love you. And I say, no, I love you more. Most of the time, it's like that pillow has two messages for me.
Right.
I do love him. I think, I tell him all the time, I love you more. But it's also a statement to myself.
Right.
To love you more.
Correct.
Love me more. Right.
Correct.
And so, yeah.
So if that then became your core belief, that means that your core belief was not that.
Yeah.
Right. Before.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's something else? Right. So I'm just throwing that out. I'm putting that out there because it's yes, it is the choice. We have the power of choice, but that choice is sort of masked, right, in what we think about the choices. So if you have 3 choices, each one of those choices are going to, look differently. based on what you think about them.
Right.
That ultimately is going to impact the decision that you actually make, which is heavily tied to those core beliefs.
Ooh.
So, right, good stuff. It is. I mean, like I
like I say, you always kind of like to think that you kind of you got it together, but sometimes, yeah, you do have to realize and recognize that, yeah, I don't know what the core belief was. I guess it was something more along the line. Really my core belief was that there's just not any good guys out there. Like that was like, I'm just meant to be by myself and I'll just have to do this all alone because I'm not going to find someone. And when that someone finally came along, it was like, and I can't even say like at that point that I made that choice that I knew that he was that person, like he was the person that he was, because it was still, we were still relatively new in our relationship, but I knew that it was different, right? And I just was like, I'm going to do something different. Like I am so tired of doing the same thing over and over again. And so maybe that's the core belief. It's like you can do something different. You don't have to pick the same path. Like make a different choice. And maybe that was the core belief. But anyways, tips for people who realize that they need to perhaps make a different choice.
Yeah. So this can be really hard, but honestly, it's really the things that I talked about. So it's really practice on enhancing your emotional intelligence. So things like working on your emotional awareness, your self-regulation, practicing empathy, strengthening your social skills, right? Like that's the emotional intelligence piece. What I talked about, cognitive flexibility. So actively practicing shifting that perspective. You can always challenge yourself. Like when you have a negative thought, challenge it with a positive one, right? You can do things like daily gratitudes, positive like successes, because when you flex that muscle when you don't need it, it's more inclined to work for you when you do, right? Mindfulness, we touched on this a little bit, but the idea of like practicing mindfulness and there's so much connection between like mindfulness and meditation. And so meditation is a practice that can sort of like center you. But when I'm speaking about mindfulness, I'm really talking about like acceptance of self, right? Accept yourself, be present, show self-love. Because if you're willing and able to do that, like that's kind of the starting point, right? You kind of have to be able to accept yourself for where you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, to then be able to say, okay, you know what? I'm accepting this, I'm acknowledging this, but I'm gonna work on changing this, or I want to challenge myself here a little bit because I'm not satisfied with the choices I'm making or how I think, or whatever that looks like for you. But it really does start with this process of having to accept where you are, like right now today. And this isn't like, we're not going back. You can't go back and change anything that has happened, right? And we can't really predict the future, so it doesn't help to sort of focus on that. But where you can do the most for yourself is really right here, right now, and focusing on what is going on for you right now. And I think the last thing I'll say, sort of like tip wise, is in the vein of accepting yourself. It really is like you have to be very realistic. And that honesty, because it's really hard to push for change, i.e. meaning like setting a goal for yourself or like changing a behavior, if you're not really honest about where you are and who you are. Right. So, if you're not someone that like likes to journal, then like it wouldn't make sense to like start a habit of trying to journal, because that you're just going to set yourself up for failure. Right. It's like
I've tried it and I'm like, no, not my thing. so
Right.
not my thing.
There's all these tips, right? And things that you can do, but it's actually like, what is actually going to work for you?
Right.
What can you actually do for yourself that you can say like, hey, I can achieve this, right? So now we're talking about like goal setting, and probably the most important thing is like you don't have to do this by yourself, right? Like you could like work with someone. You could work with someone like me, right? Like I'm a coach. I'm a therapist. I'm based in New York. You can
She does
schedule.
virtual too. No, just
I do virtual. I do virtual. And for coaching, actually, I coach all over the country. So like, you don't have to be specific in New York to receive coaching. That can be, you can be anywhere for that. And honestly, you know, sometimes it is about sort of being present, right? So like it's being present, it's goal oriented and directed. That's coaching. Coaching is very much like, hey, you want to change some things, you want to understand yourself a little bit, you want to navigate your stressors, you want to become a healthier person, right? Maybe coaching might be better for you than therapy. But I always tell people like coaching lives in therapy, but therapy does not live in coaching. And so just remember, it's like this is not an easy process. This is like a journey. I call it a journey of self-discovery, right? This is literally what I call it. And it's not necessarily a road or a journey that you have to do by yourself. Right? And I think sometimes people get caught up in this idea of like, well, I have to do this on my own. I have to, you know, I can fix this. I can solve this. And honestly, it's really hard. It's a very hard thing because you're trying to solve you. And as soon as you figure something out about yourself, something else is going to happen because we are living, at least we're trying to, right? Like we don't get to stop. You know, you shouldn't want to stop living your life to try and figure yourself out. You kind of live your life and recognize that like, hey, here's a moment or an opportunity for me to make a healthier choice today. Like I want to make healthier choices. Like, and we didn't even talk about like actually developing healthy habits, but that's another thing, right? Like you want to develop all these behaviors or these tips, right? They're healthy habits, right? You want them to become the habits that you lean into, the muscles that you flex to help create the ability for you to be really intentional about the choices that you make for yourself, or really intentional about how you look at something. Because at the end of the day, those are the only things you can control, right? Which is what you think and the choices that you make.
That's it. It's so funny because I when I was probably in my early 20s, I read Think and Grow Rich.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In that book, like my core takeaway from it, right, was that in every negative situation, there's always the seed of positive, and that humans always tend to, focus on the negative, right? Like you get so wrapped up in the negative that's going on that you can't look for the little, so it's like always look for the little teeny tiny little seed of positive. And I put that to practice once right after I read the book. I was like, yeah, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. And I was visiting someone. Voice in my head said, hey, you need to take your pocketbook out of your car. Don't leave your purse. I didn't listen. I left it in, which is another thing about like listening to the little small voice in your head that's your intuition that's telling you not to do things. And I was like, nope, I'm leaving my purse in there. And I wasn't gone 5 minutes, come back out, windows busted, purse is gone. This is back in the day when, you had actual photographs, like you didn't have it all on your phone, like you had actual pictures.
Like camera and like some film.
And I had my oldest daughter's first Christmas pictures in my purse. And all I could think of was, oh my God, my pictures are gone. And I was like, all right, I'm 2 hours away from home. I got a bust out window. I don't have a purse. I don't have, credit cards or checkbook or anything. How am I going to pick out what positive spin can I put on this situation?
That you weren't in the car when they tried to burglarize it?
That was one. But I also said, you know what? I'm here for the weekend. and I didn't need to spend any money. And whenever I was in this little town, like, I was in Augusta, Georgia. So, not huge, but it was like, that was my thing. I'm going to go up to Augusta Mall and buy something for my daughter. And I said, okay, well, I really didn't need to spend any money. So all my stuff is gone. So this is my positive. It's keeping me from spending money that I wasn't supposed to spend. And I just pray that whoever this person was that felt like they needed to break into my car and take my stuff, I hope they find another way and just help me to hold the memories of those pictures in my mind and in my heart. And, I spent the weekend, went back home, accepted that the stuff was gone. And I swear, like a week, 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from the security at the hospital that was near where I was. And they said, did you lose, was your purse stolen, or did you lose some stuff in your bag? And I said, yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. And they were like, yeah, we think we found the contents of your purse. We didn't find your purse, but we found a few of the things from your purse, and I ended up getting my pictures back.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And from that point on,
you're like, I'm sold. I'm sold.
It's like, that's okay. And so not every situation.
But that's what they talk about, right? Like people talk about like the power of positiveness, right? Like manifest destiny, like you manifest what you want, right? So, I mean, and some of that inherently is true, right? Because if you manifest positivity, then what you end up with often is positivity because it's how you see it, right?
And that experience shaped my adult life and how I even navigated the crazy relationships that I ended up having because of my whole absentee dad thing. Like it shaped all of that. And so I, and it does, it takes practice. Like, and I'm telling you, it was a stretch. It's like, okay, I can't go to the mall. Like that was a stretch, but it was a positive. And so there's always that little bit of positive spin that you can put on it.
You got to flex that muscle, right?
That's it.
Nothing's going to come if you don't flex that muscle.
That's right. It's practice. Mm-hmm. All right. So any final thoughts on mastering mindset? Any
I would say marathon, not a sprint, right? So every day is an opportunity to practice mastering mindset, right? And if you mess up tomorrow, or if you forget to practice, you can practice the next day, right? So it's and I really go back to that idea of like, be kind to yourself, show yourself some grace because it's something that you're learning how to do. So you might be new at this, and it's going to take you a while to become a master. So be kind to yourself, and again, of course, like get support. Ask someone to help you. You don't have to do it by yourself. I'm pretty sure like when Nikki posts this, like my information is there. So if anyone really ever wants to connect or like wants to talk more, all you have to do is reach out to me.
What's your website?
AtheaTlong.com. So you can Google me, Athea Long. I'm on LinkedIn. I have Psychology Today. www.atheatlong.com is how you can connect with me. Or, on Instagram. I'm not like huge on social media. It's not my thing. And I say that. I am accessible. Again, it's a choice. So if anyone needs anything, I'm always available to connect.
Thank you, Athea. And actually, I think I linked to you on my website. So livebythereal.com. You are linked there as one of my partners. and I appreciate your partnership on this journey that I'm on. And again, I believe wholeheartedly that everybody has the ability to learn how to rule their lives. You can control your thoughts, your words, your actions, your reactions. You just got to start. Just start. You'll have, as you said, 60,000 thoughts in a day. There's probably 100 situations that you'll encounter in a day that you'll get to practice that. And yeah, just try putting a little positive spin on it and see what you can get out of that, or saying thank you, and for that opportunity to try and put a spin on it. So thank you so much, and
You're
we will
welcome.
talk
Thank you
again
so
soon.
much.
Thanks.
Good to talk to you. I'll see you soon.
All right, thank you.
Bye.